I'm Dennis Bathory-Kitsz.
Hey, this is a selfie video. I've got some stuff I want to show you about how we did in the pre-Photoshop days, posters and placards and some of the things. I was the senior graphics designer for a couple of years at the State Museum in New Jersey in the 1970s. This was a couple of years before computer technology made it possible to do practically anything at the level, at least at a public museum, which was not terribly well funded. Mary, of course, has got some of the tools that we used, including the French curves and the other things that we used for alignment, and she'll show those to you. Also, my drafting kit. These are the tools that we used, and a lot of fooling around to get what we wanted. I'm going to take you through one poster and one brochure. The brochure first. This was for a series of performances called Alternatives at the State Museum that were presented in 1977 and included some people that became, over the next few years, became fairly well known. That included Mimi Gerard and her dance company, and composers Phil Nieblock, David Behrman, David Gibson and Joseph Celli, and a group called the Dashuki Music Theater, which I directed, and poets Jane Cooper, Etheridge Knight, Jackson McLowe. McLowe was known as a sort of a performance art poet. And then we also presented a group that has since become quite famous called Mabu Minds. Anyway, this is part of the Alternative series that we presented over 4 weeks on Thursday evenings in this museum. And we had to create a brochure that was sort of avant-garde enough to make sense, and also economical enough to pay for, so it was only able to do it in a couple of colors. The other one I want to show you is how we proceeded with something for a large art and techniques of lithography show, for which our poster was a copy of a print by Henri Toulouse-Lautrec, which was a poster of Aristide Briand, which was quite famous. In any case, these two items were all done by hand, and I'd like you to see how we tried to do this. Oh, by the way, I keep stuff. It's kind of pack rat behavior, but I just, when I'm done with stuff, I put it away, kind of piling it, and then I pile something on top of that and something on top of that, and I throw it in a box, put the box, label it, and put it away. So it ends up being a huge pile of posters and designs and everything that I've done from late 1960s straight through the present, with the oldest on the bottom and the newest on the top. By the way, if you want to talk to me in person, I'm in on Mondays and Wednesdays this semester of spring 2015 at Dibden. I teach composition and studio work and a bunch of other stuff. Anyway, I'm a composer. That's my real work. Some of this graphic work, of course, has been done over the years because you got to eat, and composition doesn't pay the bills. Okay, let's do it. This is the main logo for the Alternatives Festival series. Today, that would be a piece of cake in Photoshop. We just distort it, use one of the meshes and distort it. The question is, how do you take ordinary type and turn it into that back in 1970s? The first problem was the type had to be sent out. This typeface was not available in a large enough form to be usable. So we sent it to a type foundry, and they would send back a nice shiny piece of paper, which we would then make photographs of. Not photocopies, because the photocopier at the time was not dark enough, was not dense enough to give us nice blacks. So I made a couple of photographic copies of the original typescript for the word Alternatives, and then I crumpled them up and threw them underneath a bed camera, a large camera that was used for graphics. The photograph taken of several of those were exposed onto high contrast film. So I was able to expose them and develop them and produce a variety of sort of crooked letters with the shadows removed. And that gave me the logo, the best one I chose for the logo for Alternatives. Then we're trying to put together a whole brochure. So there's a number of other things that we need, including photographs. And again, I wanted to have a kind of a high contrast feel for the images. So I took all of the original photographs and I reshot them on high contrast film, actually graphics film, which was a special high contrast film. And then I took those and made prints for them at the right size with an enlarger and pasted them up onto this transparent sheet, which is one of the layers of this. Along with this, we also had a certain amount of text, and the text was also sent out, and then I re-exposed this text onto various kinds of paper. In this case, you might just be able to make out that this is a screen. We still use, in Photoshop, will use a screen. In this case, it was a 10% screen, and it's actually a physical piece of transparent film with crosshatches in it. Over on this side, we have the copy for the brochure, and the brochure's copy was done on an IBM Selectric Composer. Again, we didn't have a word processor, but this was a very advanced mechanical device, and you would type on it, and then you would, in this case I wanted a ragged right text, but you could also justify by typing the columns twice. You type it once, the machine would memorize mechanically by using all kinds of little tiny spacing gears a way to justify the text. Okay, I needed to have not only the Alternatives logo, but I needed a different kind of feel for that, and I took this same logo and I stuck it on its side and photographed it that way, actually on this angle, photographed it, and then stretched it and gave me a stretched version of the Alternatives. There's more type that went over top. So we ended up with a multi-layer brochure. And then over here, here's another one of these, and this only shows positioning, but you see that this piece of film was to be printed in a different color over top of the main brochure's front page. And again, that was done in several layers. Each layer represented a different color. Each of these is pasted up on this board, on this Bristol board. So each of these pasted up, lined up carefully with a ruler, and I indicate that I want a black text there. Then this goes over top of it, and this Pantone red text. We still use the Pantone colors, of course, in Photoshop, and there it is, Pantone 185. I wanted the Alternatives text in. And then over top of the Pantone 185, I wanted this on top of it in Pantone 297. So that it gave me a complete brochure with the text, with a 30% screen over this part here. And all of this went to the printer with bullets on it to help the printer line everything up. And these were the two sides of the brochure. The result of everything was this poster. Get the idea that we have these composite sets of colored elements, text, and behind here you can make out the screening of the names. And over here, the high contrast elements all ended up printed in that Pantone blue color, and the text down around this side. On the other side, we have here simple black over blue, and the text over on this side as well. And then, of course, the big panel in the middle, which contains the black, the red, and the blue. All of it done without a single intervention of any computerized device. One of the more ambitious projects taken on for a poster at the State Museum in New Jersey was for a show called The Art and Techniques of Lithography. The idea was to take one of those multicolor prints and render it as the poster for the show. Now here's the original sketch of how the thing would be set up. We'd have the poster of Aristide Briand by Henri Toulouse-Lautrec here, and then we'd have some text down here that would be telling about the show. Okay, so that was the sketch. Now the question is, how did we take that and get it onto the poster? Because we had a couple of jobs. One was to create a large poster to display, and the other one was to create large banners, placards in front of the museum, which were going to be silkscreen in several colors. So this was the original, and then the first thing we did, because we knew we were going to need it, was to send out for the type. And so we sent out for all the bits of type that we would need, in both positive and negative, to make things easy. This is what we got back from the typesetter. These shiny, see the reflection on these shiny photographic originals. of the type. So we had the type in hand, and here's the bill, by the way, for 2 different shows we were doing. So it showed that it was a large photocopy, wet copy, by the way. This was in the days of wet copies. Wet copy of the type with the approval and the bill below. Here is a rendering of a photograph of the original in black and white. And I'm sorry, but I can't show you the poster because I don't seem to have a copy. This was done in reds and blacks and a variety of other colors. And so this was what was available. I then took that and I marked it up. I marked up what I wasn't going to be using. That's crossed out there. Not on our poster, it says. And then I have to screen all this for hand detail. And then I mark here the various colors that I was going to need for this. I then had a photograph taken of it for me to work as my bottom board below. Here's what I was working with, and how I got rid of I had to get rid of some of that material and cover some of this up and paste this up. So this is my dummy. This is my working dummy. And now here comes the ambitious part. I had the Toulouse-Lautrec right there in front of me. And what I did was use this dummy as the base on which I placed transparent Rubylith, as it was called. It was a material that was a complete sheet of red that you would cut, and then when you cut it, it would leave behind whatever you didn't want. So I'm going to have to try to peel this apart. I can't really peel it apart. It's been stuck together, sitting in a folder that I haven't looked at for over 35 years. But you can see that the Rubylith is cut with a razor blade. You cut or with an X-Acto knife, technically. You cut partway through just the surface of the Rubylith, leaving the backing, which was stronger, behind, and then you peeled off what you didn't need. So this was quite literally all done with a hand cutting tool. I ended up with a layer in Pantone 457, which consisted mostly of his hair. You can see me bending that over. Then a layer in Pantone 455, and 455 was the large dark areas, this sort of greenish color, and then a layer of Pantone 158, which was the red jacket that he had, and then finally a layer of black. And when all of these were hand cut and ready, layers were then sent to the other department, which of course in those days was a sneaker net of me carrying them to the other department using the big camera, the big graphics camera, to transfer those to film. And if you look in the back here, I think you can see the film was not always perfect. It came up with spots, so we used an opaquing ink to cover up any spots that were in there. So that's one layer. Here's another layer. And another layer. And the hair, which was the fourth color. And there are the little bullets identified. And then you can see very carefully, because this is covered up with opaquing stuff on the back now, that with opaquing tape, that it says Pantone 457. I don't know if you can see that. Pantone 457. So each of these has its color identified, and this says black. There's another Pantone color. So each of these were then exposed to a silk. So we used real silk in those days, and each one was exposed. Chemicals were put on it. Where the area was exposed, it hardened. Where the area was not exposed, it softened. And so we were able to wash off the softened area, and the exposed areas were hard. The ink did not go through those and went through the others. And we pulled the 4 different colors for the silk screen for the posters. And that's how we made the posters.